We're going to stay with that story. In her Human Rights Day speech yesterday, Dr. Naledi Pandor actually warned that South Africa finds itself caught in the US's struggle to maintain global dominance. Well, this comes amid the rising tensions with President Donald Trump ordering the expulsion of South Africa's United States ambassador, while helping us to examine the impact of these political dynamics on South Africa's global standing and how the country is also navigating its foreign relations in a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape is the director of the Center for African Studies for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria. That is Professor Chris Isike. Professor, it's always good to have you with us. Welcome. So, look, when we had our chat about the current tensions, in fact, at that time, I think they were still brewing between the United States as well as South Africa. You called for diplomacy and insisted on salvaging the relations with the United States. And this was actually long before the expulsion of our ambassador, meaning these tensions are progressive, almost deliberate attacks on South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely, you're correct. That things have changed then. They have escalated somewhat. But it's clear that in any kind of contestation between South Africa and the United States has the upper hand. So while we call for diplomacy and caution and wisdom, which the president has exhibited so far in dealing with the US, at the same time respecting South Africa's sovereignty and national integrity, which is also part of its core national interest, will remain paramount. So we'll just have to wait and see to ensure that South Africa doesn't fire the first salvo, but there will come a point where South Africa will have to cut its losses and move on, even after making all the necessary attempts to try and salvage whatever it is it can salvage at this point.
I mean, what can we salvage at this point, Professor, as we head into the G20, which South Africa is the presidency of, which takes place in a couple of months' time? What happens to that?
Well, like I've said before, the United States is just one country of the 19 members of the G20, excluding, of course, the African Union and the European Union. Mm-hmm. And so if that one country doesn't play ball because they don't like South Africa, whatever that means, South Africa should not be caught up in worrying about that too much. You know, there are other countries that are interested, and many of them attended the summits, the Foreign Ministers Summit and the Treasury Secretary of Finance Ministers Summit that we had in South Africa a few weeks ago. And in my view, if the United States doesn't, attend in full force, it will be their own loss. But however, we must know that even though we didn't have the ministers or the secretaries, as they call them in the US, attend this summit, they had representation. And South Africa has been meeting with, other technical committee members of the United States who have taken active part in this discussion. So I don't think we should pay too much attention to America not attending the G20 summit, even when it does happen later in the year.
Now, I'm sure, Professor, you heard me speak to my, of course, one of our reporters preceding our interview. And you heard that, of course, he's saying that the president has actually cautioned for those that will be attending the welcoming ceremony of former Ambassador Rasool to actually exercise restraint. But I'm actually wondering who he's giving these instructions to, because I've always maintained this. South Africa has not been the aggressor in these tensions.
Yes, South Africa has not been the aggressor. Clearly, President Trump had his eyes on South Africa even before,
yes,
the Expropriation Act issues. He had decided what he wanted to do to South Africa before he even became president. So that's clear. In that regard, there is little that South Africa can do, and that's why I'm not, for example, in support of, a quick replacement for Ambassador Rasool. The idea is to wait and see what the United States does, and use that as a bargaining chip to get to discuss what South Africa also wants. South Africa does hold some cards, but like we've always maintained, if the relationship was to completely turn sour, it will be South Africa that will be hit the most because of the disparities not just in geopolitical power, but also economic power between both. So that's why this is the case. However, we must also note that there needs to be some kind of control about who speaks about these issues, okay? Right now, it's almost a free-for-all. Anybody can decide to speak about these matters, and that's where I think the president is trying to come in and stop to control communication that speaks on behalf of the South African state, right? There needs to be some kind of coordination around that. There are countries where, because of the kind of personality that's right now in the White House, countries have decided that only maybe the Prime Minister, the Minister of State, and maybe a high-ranking officer would speak on anything concerning the U.S. I know a country like Australia does that. So it's not helpful at a point where South Africa knows that it still has something to benefit from this relationship economically, to then allow party echelons, armchair critics, and all kinds of people making statements that may not necessarily have that economic interest in the long term. So I think we should leave it in the capable hands of the president. He knows what exactly he's doing. He knows why he's still in this business of wanting to negotiate. And if all else fails, we would know that we did our best. And I think that that's a very useful path to than an all-out confrontation, which for me would be immature, especially if you want to match President Trump on his theatrics.
Mm-hmm. Professor, you raised very interesting points there. Very quickly as we close, I mean, you spoke about quick replacements that should be halted. The DA's Helen Zille suggested that Tony Leon would be a great ambassador to replace Rasool, and said that Mr. Rasool actually said things that no ambassador should ever say about their host country. What do you firstly make of these sentiments? And also, are you then suggesting that at this stage, we just have to wait out the Trump administration to even try and revisit any of those diplomatic talks?
Yes, we should wait it out because like Rasool said himself at that webinar, we've always known this. The United States has closed its door to state-to-state engagement with South Africa, yes. And it's very deliberate. They know exactly what they are doing, apart from the fact that the right people we should be talking to, some of them have still not been appointed. It's still early days for the United States. It's just that the Land Expropriation Act came on early, and Donald Trump lashed in on that to execute his agenda. So it will not be useful to rush to appoint anyone at this stage. And remember also that there is a character who is South African American, who has been saying a lot of things, doing the same things that Rasool has been accused of doing, making statements about South Africa's domestic politics and internal affairs that such a character should not be making. So it's also a question of whether South Africa will be willing to accept this person, and I'm talking of Geopolitical, whether South Africa will be willing to accept him as the ambassador, because it's been touted that he's going to be Donald Trump's pick. So these are issues that needs to be looked at carefully. There's no need for anyone to rush. Absolutely. And once again, the relevant authorities, says the professor, must be accorded the time and space to actually be engaging on the national duty, or the duty of those authorities, which is, of course, to go and engage with our United States counterparts, and not just anybody who goes and misrepresents the country. That was Professor Chris Isike there on the U.S. as well as SA tensions.